The separation of church and state, as you likely know it, doesn't exist. Find out what I mean on this week's episode of Liberty at Home. I'm sure this one won't be controversial. Hello and welcome to this very non-controversial episode of Liberty at Home here on Easton Community Access Television. As you may know, I'm Adam RIVEIRO, the pastor of Liberty Baptist Church and your host of this weekly telecast. Today, as always, we're broadcasting from Easton, Massachusetts, where I frequented the new Taco Bell at Five Corners a little bit too much since it opened a couple months ago, especially since my doctor just told me my blood type is fire sauce. Today, in honor of our nation's 250th anniversary, I want to talk to you about a topic that is often mentioned yet misunderstood: the separation of church and state. Now, you may be getting nervous, like, what's a pastor doing talking about this subject? But I assure you, if you give me a few minutes, I think I can bring some historical perspective to the table. One of the foundational principles of our country is the separation of church and state. However, did you know it was Baptists from New England that helped solidify that right in America? Also, did you know that the phrase separation of church and state has greatly morphed from its original meaning over the past 200 years? The Anabaptists were one of the most persecuted groups of the Reformation period in Europe. Because Anabaptists firmly believed infant baptism was unscriptural due to the fact that babies cannot choose to have faith in Christ, they ran contrary to the state churches of many European nations. This resulted in a prolonged period of persecution for Anabaptists, who both scripturally and morally believed there should be no state churches and each person should be free to come to Christ by their own volition. However, governments at the time saw it differently, and the Anabaptists found themselves on the wrong side of the law. In parts of the Holy Roman Empire in 1525, the refusal to baptize a child or rebaptism of an adult after salvation was punishable by fine, imprisonment, or banishment. In 1530, the crime became a capital offense. Also, the Act of Uniformity in 1662 required all worship in England and Wales to be done according to the Anglican Book of Common Prayer, basically outlawing any other religious group. These are two of a multitude of examples of the unyielding church and state marriage in Europe. Now, unfortunately, the state church model was then imported to America during colonial times. Although colonies like Rhode Island and Pennsylvania became havens for religious freedom, they were small pockets of religious freedom in a new world that religiously looked a lot like the old world. Even in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, worship outside the Congregational Church was prohibited for some time. In 1651, the Baptist pastor Obadiah Holmes was given a whipping of 30 lashes outside of the State House for holding a prayer meeting in Swampscott that was unsanctioned by the local Congregational Church. Now, we fast forward a little bit to the year 1801, when America is free of British rule, the Constitution is firmly in place, and Thomas Jefferson is president. A group of Baptists from Connecticut called the Danbury Baptist Association wrote a letter to President Jefferson sharing some of their concerns that the Constitution didn't go far enough in ensuring the church-state model was totally dismantled. Naturally, these Baptists were skittish due to hundreds of years of persecution. In their letter, they wrote the following: "Our sentiments are uniformly on the side of religious liberty, that religion is at all times and places a matter between God and individuals, that no man ought to suffer in name, person, or effects on account of his religious opinions, that the legitimate power of civil government extends no further than to punish the man who works ill to his neighbor." Now, Thomas Jefferson, in his reply to the Danbury Baptists, heartily agreed with this thought. In his letter, he stated, "Believing with you that religion is a matter which lies solely between man and his God, that he owes account to none other for his faith or his worship, that the legislative powers of government reach actions only and not opinions, I contemplate with sovereign reverence that act of the whole American people which declared that their legislator would make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of separation between church and state." There it is. I'd encourage folks to read both letters in their entirety, which honestly are easy to find with an online search. Thus, with President Jefferson's reply to the Baptists, the phrase separation of church and state was born. Many are surprised that the phrase is not found in the Declaration of Independence, nor in the Constitution. Yes, the greatly used and even more greatly misused phrase that was written in a private letter from Thomas Jefferson to a humble group of Baptists was never meant to be a term as an impetus to remove all mention of government or God from the government, nor was it ever meant as a way to remove biblical principles from the town square. Instead, it was meant to show that never again would the government compel anyone to be part of a state church. So, the next time you hear the phrase separation of church and state being thrown around in a conversation about religion and government, even within our own town hall or committee meetings, remember the real intent of the phrase, as well as the Baptists who played a part in coining it. Well, our time is spent on today's edition of Liberty at Home. And since the screen's about to fade to black, let me quickly remind you that you're always invited to join us at Liberty Baptist Church here in Easton, right on Route 138. Look us up at mylibertybaptist.org. Well, this is Adam Rivero signing off with a reminder that where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's liberty. Catch you next week on ECAT for yet another edition of Liberty at Home.